Trolls.
From
Great.
the troll dolls. Now even more trolls.
Now see, I'm old enough. Trolls for me, their dolls are those little short ones with the orange hair that sticks straight up.
Those are the ones that you rub their belly, wasn't it? We got a diamond in them.
And this is the advantage I have that my kids are now, I don't even want to say because then you'll have an accurate guess of how old I am. But yeah, my son's 27, my daughter's 25. I loved when they were kids because action figures changed. When I was a kid, you got a bag of plastic army men or cavalry guys and Indians, and those had to become whoever superhero you were doing, because this guy's holding a thing like this. It looks like he could be flying, so that's my Superman character. When my son was like 4, they actually came out with segmented Marvel superheroes and stuff. So my 4-year-old has a glow-in-the-dark Ghost Rider that gives him nightmares, but I think is the coolest toy ever. So my son had all the toys I wanted growing up. Only for a while. He got over it. I took him to Jurassic Park when he was like 6. And it was a great movie, but oh, did we have nightmares. I let him watch the original Halloween when he was like 9. My ex-wife blew a gasket. Like, you can't let him watch a horror movie like that, it'll warp him, he'll be terrified. My 9-year-old son has been training since he was 3. He goes, Mom, have you seen it? The guy walks like this. I can get away. And besides, he's got a knife. Mom, I have a sword. She's like, you have a what? I'm like, great, now I'm in trouble. Because I gave my kid a sword. I was that dad that, when you're a kid, your parents won't let you throw a ball on the house and stuff. I was that dad that I invented games to throw a ball on the house. And my kids had swords and knives from as early on as they could walk without ever, don't shake your head at me. Do you know how many injuries my kids had with weapons? 0, but every time they had a friend over, they had to police their room and get everything that was possibly dangerous and put it in my room and close the door because their friends were morons.
No.
They would get my kids knew they would not do anything to get in trouble because if they behaved with the weapons, I'd teach them how to do more cool things than they could come up with on their own, because I was the fun dad. That was me with some of the weapons we're going to talk about. Figuring out how they worked for real, not just as a practice weapon or a padded one. I took real versions. Well, that's not fun. That's my can of soda.
It's all over my skirt.
But
Skirt's soap.
these weapons, the Kama, my favorite of the non-traditional weapons of feudal Japan, by far, and gross, nasty, and the things you can do with these are uncanny and way cool. And my son and I were practicing how to use them and doing really dangerous, dumb things. I may be the only person in the entire Midwest to have broken the picture window in their living room with a coconut and had it launched from one of these. But we were practicing. Don't laugh at me. But as soon as I explain how it happened, you'll want to do it too. It was very cool. It just didn't work out the way I planned. That's exactly how it worked. I have for the bondage band.
I think that was during our panel.
Who said that? That was you, right? No. My virgin from Cards Against Humanity. Look, there are things to brag about and things to just not talk about. And that's one of them. That's like for our stage show, it's time to do the test cutting. I say, all right, this is the part where we need audience participation. We need and people think I'm going to say volunteer, so everybody puts their hands up. And when I say, virgin, there's always at least one girl that goes, and then realize what they did, then put their hand back up. I'm like, too late, Mom saw you. Actually, that's not the problem. Dad saw you too, and your boyfriend is dead. And he didn't even do anything. Yay. I didn't even know what this was until we started doing anime conventions. And in anime, this is like the primary weapon that everybody knows this. They all had one of these. Like, no, they didn't. But, okay, if it helps sell things. Spikes. Spikes. Shuriken. Everybody's familiar with throwing stars, but shaken is a generic Japanese term for small blade, and so it referred to a variety of different small bladed weapons that you would throw. These are the ones everybody remembers because the throwing spikes weren't actually very effective outside of like 10 feet. And if you're 10 feet away, that's one step and stab. This will work better just held in your hand. It's kind of like knife throwing. It's a lot of fun. And I have some friends that get really into it. But they've shown for police officer tests, they did all this stuff in the 90s trying to determine how long it takes you to get your sidearm unholstered and bring it into play. And they determined that if a suspect was within 21 feet, they could get to you before you could get the gun out. 21 feet. And it didn't matter whether there were obstacles or not. It was almost always, because we did the scenario with like furniture from a living room and stuff. I got to be one of the martial arts guys that worked with our local police department on training things where they got the blue safety gun-shaped things that wouldn't actually fire. And we had padded knives with the chalk on them because that would show if you hit them so that nobody could argue and go, you didn't hit me. Like the big chalk X in the center of your chest says otherwise. But so we got to do these training scenarios where the officer would be ready, and you'd be 21 feet away with a bunch of chairs and stuff between you, and it'd be like, go! And they'd try to get the gun out, and your job was to hit them. I love doing that. Some of the cops are actually really good about it and worked on it because they knew it was important. Some of the guys are really defensive and very angry about it. And that's why I'm glad they had the little blue safety guns and not their actual sidearm, just empty. Because sometimes people forget. One of our Iowa City cops shot his partner in the leg last year, cleaning his gun. If we have anybody who's into handguns, our cops carry Glock 17s, and a Glock is a gun that you have to pull the trigger and take the slide off. And so you don't just drop the magazine. You always have to look and make sure there's not one in the chamber because it will fire without a magazine. And the guy dropped the mag and went to grab the little tabs to pull down to release the slide, pulled the trigger and shot his partner right in the leg because he had one chambered. Luckily it's just a flesh wound. But still, when that happens, no matter how much you try to keep it quiet, that goes national. That was a FARC headline. And I knew the cops. I thought it was hysterical. I'm like, I told you guys you need to practice more than just qualifying once a year.
Dan.
Yes?
So, first of all, I want to talk about movies that do martial arts. Are there any that do it right?
Yeah, there are. And it's usually in a mix. I mean, everybody likes the Avengers and Captain America and stuff. The beginning of the second Captain America movie, where he and Black Widow are trying to do something on a ship. I have never been so happy and then so angry at a movie in my life as the beginning of the second Captain America movie. Because the martial arts they did for him, based on having power and superior speed, all of the techniques they used were strong system moves. Knees that were thrown correctly instead of just the up where they're hitting the thigh, but you're actually driving the knee forwards and in. So he would launch targets, so he had a lot of damage, but the techniques he did, the blocks and power moves to flip them over and stuff, and the major joint techniques, they nailed it, and it looked really good. I'm like, that's awesome. And then the stuff they did for the Black Widow, because she's not strong, she's fast. What they gave her was not fast martial art techniques, it was Hollywood stunt choreography gone awry. It was wushu. If you watch Chinese martial art movies, there's a stunt company in Hong Kong that trained Jackie Chan and Jet Li and the Japanese group, the Band of 88, that was in the Kill Bill movies. If you saw Kill Bill and wondered why the Japanese guys with Japanese swords looked like Chinese guys, it's because they were Japanese trained in China. And they weren't using kenjutsu techniques, they were using stunt choreography from Hong Kong film studios. But they did that for Black Widow's fight scenes. Her stuff was, if you jump up and wrap both thighs around my head and fall over this way and twerk your hips, you are not going to take my 245 pounds and flip it up in the air and catapult me down the hallway. You're going to end up hanging right here while I'm going, get off of me! And it'll be like the Hulk with Loki. I'm like, that's it. But for the action movies, some of them actually do it really well. I don't know if anybody saw The Hunted with Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro, where Benicio plays a special forces guy who goes nuts. And he starts hunting hunters in the forest with a knife. So these guys have high-powered rifles and deer scent, and he has a knife and a really bad attitude. And so they're chasing him, and Tommy Lee Jones was his knife instructor, and they brought him in to chase him down. But there's one scene where they're in a hotel, and he's in the basement trying to get away, and an FBI agent has a gun out, and he's doing everything by the book, and he turns, and Tommy Lee Jones, or Benicio del Toro, pops up, passes the right arm, comes up and locks up on the other side of his neck, and pulls it in against his shoulder, which is a standing triangle choke. If we have anybody who likes mixed martial arts, the triangle choke used to be a big ground fighting technique. You lay on your back and you get one leg under their shoulder and one over the opposite shoulder, and you hook your feet and tighten. That was a stand-up technique prior to Gracie's modified that for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's a stand-up technique. And one of the variations on it is with a knife, reverse grip. So when somebody stabs at you or you block, you pass the strike, come up, catch it. So this is across the chest, and this is going right in along parallel to the back. And the other hand catches, you pull them in against your shoulder to choke them out, and you power assist the knife down into the spinal column. And they nailed that move. Was absolute textbook perfect. And I was watching the movie with a bunch of people who didn't know me very well, and I got really excited. I saw the movie and I jumped up from the chair, spilled popcorn, and went, yes, I know that move. They got it right. And anyway, yeah. So, don't you want your child to take Aikido with me? We're going to make gentle circles, lead them over to the ground, and we'll just. So there are some. But they're not normally the Ninja Turtle movies. Did somebody raise their hand? We haven't started the panel yet. I'm just babbling. You did.
Talking about the movie, but I didn't catch the name of the movie.
The name of the movie is called The Hunted.
The Hunted.
There are 2 movies with that name, and I own both of them. The Hunted with Tommy Lee Jones and Benicio del Toro. It has some neat fight scenes, but some of the knife work in it is really, really dumb. Coming from somebody who helps train instructors for the American Knife Fighting Congress, some of that stuff is really dumb, but that move was outstanding. The other movie, when you type in The Hunted, IMDb is going to take you to that one, or a 1995 movie with Christopher Lambert and John Lone, and that's a samurai versus ninja movie from Japan with Kodo in it, the big taiko group. And it is a modern samurai clan fighting against a ninja clan, and it is one of my favorite B movies of all time because they get the attitude right between the two. I mean, that movie was the inspiration for the Samurai versus Ninja, the quiz, because it really showed the difference between. Anyway, we should start the actual panel now. Even though we did the exact same panel last year right before closing ceremonies. We could have just put up a screen and showed last year because you probably filmed that too.
She did.
The only way anybody knows last year main event was upstairs. And they're like, that's a different background. We're going to talk. Description says ninja weapons of death because that sounds a lot cooler than non-traditional weapons of feudal Japan. And if I called it that, there would be fewer of you because ninja weapons of death sounds cooler. And what we're going to talk about is an incredibly brief history lesson, and then we're going to show off with weapons. I'm going to let you ask questions. I always say I'm going to do that, and then I never do. But since my assistant is running away and doesn't know these weapons at all, she can't really be my helper for demonstrating things. And she's like, I'll be back. Sure, my mom said that too, and they moved. Didn't happen to me, but it actually happened to a college student that worked for me once when I was in Texas. His parents moved. He was a freshman, he'd never left home before, and they moved him to the dorm of this college, like 120 miles away. And at Thanksgiving, he got a bus ticket to go back home for Thanksgiving weekend, and Wednesday I put him on the bus. And on Thursday, I was just sitting down to Thanksgiving dinner, and my phone rang, and it was him saying, can you pick me up from the bus station? He took the bus all the way home to Fort Worth, Texas, and no one picked him up from the bus depot, so he hitchhiked home. And when he got there, he walked up, and the door was locked, and his key didn't work. So he knocked on the door opens, and there's some lady standing there who he's never seen before in his life, and she goes, what do you want? This is the only home he's ever lived in for 18 years. And his parents moved and didn't tell him. And he went home for Thanksgiving. Luckily, he had enough on the ball to go back to the bus station and trade his return ticket to come back. And the college knew the parents moved because they were paying his bills. Nobody ever thought to tell this poor kid. So when Christmas break came, he went home and he never came back. As far for all I know, 25 years later, he's still in his parents' basement going, you're not moving, you're not moving. Japan, feudal Japan, which is where most of the martial arts training that I have was based out of 16th century techniques and material. Feudal Japan was a caste system. What that means is, if dad was a samurai, you were a samurai. And if you had a child, your child was going to be a samurai. It doesn't matter whether they were any good at it or not, they were going to be a samurai. Caste system is a great thing if you're one of the nobles in charge. The bad part about a caste system is if your father is a camel dung dealer, guess what you're going to be in life? A camel dung dealer. Guess what your child's going to be? He's also going to be a little turd. I mean, a camel dung dealer. And a caste system is not the best because it's not going to bring out the best and brightest. It's just simply your child is going to be successful if you're successful. And one of the ways governments maintain power, because the nobles wanted to keep the caste system in place, one of the ways a government will stay in power is they pass laws that make it illegal for common people to have weapons. Because if they can't fight back, they have to do what the government tells them to. Okay, and I'm not going to go any deeper into this, but you now know where I stand on the Second Amendment, just in case you were curious before. But Japan did the same thing. The Japanese government, prior to 1550 AD, actually passed laws that made it illegal for the common people to possess the katana, the Japanese longsword, the naginata, which was basically a sword on a stick, and the wakizashi, the Japanese short sword. So basically they took the best weapons for self-defense and offense, and they made them illegal for a commoner to own or have on their person. In fact, in the early 17th century, after 1600, when the Tokugawas came into power, it was a death sentence for a peasant to be found with the Japanese longsword. They adjusted the laws a little bit so some of the highest ranking merchant class could carry the short sword, the wakizashi, but again, not the naginata and not the katana, the long sword. And what they told the peasants was the same thing that we're told today. You don't need to be able to protect yourselves. We're in charge, we'll protect you. And I'm not trying to be mean, but my favorite Facebook meme that anyone has ever sent me was a notice that said, remember, when seconds count, the police are only minutes away.
Yes.
I mean, as far as your first line of self-defense is still you. If somebody breaks into your house, the police will not get there before they make it through the window. Unless you have really heavy storm windows and a shotgun, and telling them, no. The Japanese peasants ended up in the same boat. While the nobility were supposed to protect them, despite their best efforts, they didn't always show up on time. And so the peasants had to protect themselves. And what they did is they took common implements, not weapons, but implements, and they were normally farm tools, because anybody who's ever seen Children of the Corn, farm tools are nasty. I've seen all 6 of those movies, and they were all terrible but the first one. Anyway, but I still watched them, because I'm an optimist. It might be good. What they did is they took implements, normally farm implements, and they adapted them for self-defense use. Some of the weapons turned out to be really effective, and some of them weren't as effective. I'm not going to say they sucked. I'll let you draw your own conclusions. But we're going to talk about these weapons, and I've trained in all of them for years. And this isn't just personal. I like this one. I don't like this one, because some of them I like aren't actually very effective. And that would be, we're going to start with the Ninja Turtles. This is Raphael's weapon. Raphael was my favorite Ninja Turtle because he had the worst attitude problem. And I'd act like that too if my wife would let me. But see, she makes me behave. But this is a sai. This is Raphael's weapon of choice. And a ridiculously cool looking weapon. It shows up in every ninja movie. It shows up in Egyptian movies because apparently the mummy had guards that used these, which I haven't found any historical reference to at all. But the 2 chicks in the second Mummy movie fighting with them look good, so I let it go. This is a sai. This is a really common martial arts weapon. And for you Marvel files, this would be Elektra's weapon. If anybody saw Daredevil, that was Elektra in red leather, spinning and cutting through sandbags and stuff with Evanescence screaming in the background, which is the best way to listen to Evanescence because unlike the karaoke bar next door, she can sing. Did I say that out loud? I'm much braver when I'm armed, even with these. As far as her turning and cutting through sandbags with the amazing sai, I have a bad thing for you. It's not sharp. And that's not because this is the special needs version of the sai. The sai was a farm tool. Japanese peasants that planted rice, this is how bad the economy was for them because the nobility took everything. Peasants planted rice by the individual seed. Now that sounds dumb. If we want to seed our backyard, you get a little broadcast spreader and a bag of seed from Lowe's, and you throw it in and you just push it and it throws it everywhere. Japanese peasants planted seeds. Has anybody ever seen a Japanese rice field? Maybe not in person, but just pictures online. What does a rice field look like? Does it look like fresh tilled dirt with
Water.
It's water. The field is underwater. It's about 4 inches of water over the top of 4 inches of mud. And if we have anybody who's ever planted seeds before, if you just take a seed and throw it on top of the water, does it sink to the bottom, dig its way through 4 inches of mud, and then germinate and sprout roots and then grow? No, it sits on top of the water and it rots. And the birds eat it. So Japanese peasants had to plant rice seeds. And for a time, what they used was a pronged instrument with a flat end. And what you did was you took the rice seed and you pushed it down through the mud, and when this hit mud, you were deep enough, they assumed it would germinate and grow. How would you like that to be your job? 12 hours a day, you're kneeling in mud going 4,221, 4,222. But I mean, talk about carpal tunnel. And one of the beauties to that is you could plant different colored rice seeds that would grow different plants. And if you've seen, you can look online at some of the designs that the Japanese have done with growing rice in different colors from aerial views, because they're doing it this way. It's like a tattoo artist on a whole acre field. It sucked. But somewhere along the line, they realized if someone attacks you and you have a 12-inch metal spike, it's not razor sharp, but it is a 12-inch spike. If you stick that in someone's eye socket and push until you hit tines, that will do bad things. It will discourage people. It will not cut and slice and dice like you see in the movies. And there's an easy way to tell that too. If you've trained with this, if you have a Kabuto weaponry instructor that teaches you how to use the sai, you don't hold it like this because it's not balanced for that. You hold it this way, where you can hold it tight, or you can hold it this way. Both hands, because then you can reverse it. You can strike with that end, then with this end. But if you buy these from a vendor, you go to the vendor hall and the guy goes, "Yep, that was the sword breaker." And what they did was the samurai would swing the sword and the ninja would catch it and twist the blade and snap it off. Does anybody see a problem with that plan? If you're holding it like this is the sort of block you can only do once, twice, 3, and by 4 you're not doing it anymore, you're back to special needs. This actually would not break a sword blade. And to be clear, I've taken our stage blades, not the 700-year-old, $40,000 folded steel katana, but the $150 spring steel stage blades, and locked them up and smashed it as hard as I could, kicked it even, trying to get it to break a sword blade, and it didn't work. It doesn't break a sword blade. The dynamics are just not correct for it. It's myth. It's hyperbole. Because it looks cool. And there were things you could do with them, but as an actual self-defense weapon, aside from just poking someone and driving, because this would go great under the sternum and then in and up. They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Sometimes it is. But it was tough to get that weapon in there. It did give rise to an actual idea, though, that the Japanese police adopted after 1600. They took a sai and realized having 2 prongs was unnecessary, so they knocked one off. And they made the central spike, since they didn't want to stab people with them, they made it thicker with one spike. This was called a jite, and they actually used this in the red light district as a secondary weapon because the police were watching over the red light district, which is where young samurai went to play when they didn't have any battles to fight. And the government was all for that because if you can keep a man drunk, stupid, and having sex, he's not going to overthrow the government because he's drunk and stupid and busy. But to help the samurai stay under control, it was bad for a drunk samurai wandering around swinging a sword to have the police just shoot him. That's not really popular today either. So they tried to find better ways to do it. And what they settled on was a 50-inch oak dowel called a jo. Apparently it was Bo's little brother. And a jite. And what they would do is while samurai was out drunk swinging the sword around being stupid, they would take the 40-inch club, basically, and they would block the sword. I don't mean against the edge. A good katana will cut right through that oak dowel. I've done demos that way with my son holding one and just chopped it off into bits. So you blocked with against the side of the blade and brought it down, and then you'd come over the top and put this here and go twist. It wouldn't break the blade, but what it would do is lock the blade in place so the samurai couldn't swing it around. And then you would take the stick and explain things to the drunk guy. Because you can reason with a man if he's semi-conscious and laying on the ground. And if we have anybody who trained in modern day Aikido, if you do jo techniques, once you get past the little 13-count kata, a lot of the jo techniques you learn, you're wondering, why am I using a stick against an unarmed man and twisting his arm up behind his back and doing a pin? What you are learning is Goshin Jitsu. There are rest techniques that the Doshin had to use against a drunk samurai. Once they locked the blade and hit him and separated him from the sword, they would twist them up and hold them still. So, non-traditional weapons in feudal Japan. Our first Ninja Turtle weapon did not work very well. So let's move on to Michelangelo, because Mikey's an idiot, but he's got cool toys. The nunchaku, also known as nunchucks, alternately known as the YouTube weapon of infamy. Because everybody has seen videos of, I want to say 15-year-old boys using these incorrectly, but I have 30-year-old instructors who do the exact same thing with these. Because they're really cool to use as aerial weapons, and you do all the spinning things, and you rotate them, and they're cool. And that's not actually how they were used, but they look awesome. But they're the YouTube weapon of infamy because everybody's seen videos of someone using these incorrectly and hurting themselves. And when they do, it's in one of three areas. The first area where you misuse one of these is when you're spinning it around, going around like this, and tucking under, and you bring it up, is the guy who hits himself right on top of the head. You would be amazed how often that happens, and you can always tell then that it is their best friend who's recording, because when the guy goes whack and hits himself in the head and falls down, they keep filming. But the angle's shaking because the guy's laughing his butt off. So he's zooming in to get a good close look at his friend who just knocked himself cold. But this was originally, it was a threshing tool. It was a farming tool they used for wheat. Because what you did is when you harvested wheat, when you cut the plant down, you brought it in and you put it on these large spread out sheets, and you separated the actual wheat that you can cook with that has nutritional value from the plant fibers that didn't have value. That's called the chaff. And what you did is you put it out on a hard surface, you spread the sheet out, and you took two sticks that were attached with normally a leather strap, a small piece of leather. The modern martial art weapons, they use chain, and some of them have ball bearings, swivels, so they move really fast and they're cool. But it was two sticks, and you would hit the wheat over and over again to separate it from the fibers. And then you'd have two people, we'd take the ends of the sheet, we'd lift it up and bring it down. And the wheat product was heavier and it would stay on the sheet or settle back down. And the chaff would blow away in the wind. Obviously you don't do that in the spring because in Wichita, you guys get 40-mile-an-hour winds. And it blows away small children and dogs. That was the first time I did the Wichita Ren Fair. It was kind of, oh my God. Because the wind's blowing, there were so many, have anybody been to Wichita Ren Fair? The park there has these really bad seeds in the grass. The wind was blowing so hard it was blowing them sideways. Yes, thank you if you're closing the doors. It does seem a little low rent to do that in front of the open door of a program going on, but hey, have at it. Pay no attention to the 6'7" man with the weapon who's glaring at you. You're my hero. Even if you're wearing a cat shirt, I'm a dog person. I like cats too, but I'm allergic to them.
I still like you. I like you.
I didn't know I was allergic to cats. I grew up with cats, but they were farm cats. They were always outside. I didn't know I was allergic to cats until I was a sophomore in college. I was dating a girl who had a cat in her apartment. And every time I go over to her house, I had huge allergy attacks. And for a while, I was afraid I was just allergic to her. And that was a really bad thing because the girls didn't like me in college, a lot like now. And I thought, man, if I'm allergic to her, maybe I can get Benadryl shots or something so I can still have a girlfriend. We figured out it was the cat. And she decided she liked the cat more than me, so I had to poison the cat. And no, I wouldn't do that. I'm the guy, I can't even flush a goldfish down the drain if it's still alive because it just seems cruel. I'll open the window to let flies out.
You're not supposed to flush like goldfish.
I'm not? That's because they get in the sewer system and they eat down there for years and they become giant mutant Oh no, those are alligators. Giant mutant goldfish would make a great sci-fi original. The nunchaku though, it was originally a threshing weapon and somebody got the idea that, you know what, that end's moving pretty fast. And they're right. When you see people in different postures where they're holding these, you're keeping tension on both ends. And from this ready position, you can let go with the bottom hand and hit somebody in the head. Or you can let go with the top hand and hit them in the chin, or gentlemen, target of opportunity, a little bit lower, whack! And that discourages people. But they've learned that you can get these things spinning, so the end of that is running in excess of 140 miles an hour. Now, if you contrast that with someone's fist, good middleweight boxer, flicking a jab out and bringing it back, they've clocked at about 52 miles an hour. So this is moving a lot faster, and you can inflict pretty good damage that way. You've probably seen the guys on videos where there's a cucumber on a spike on a stick, and they're going whack and breaking a cucumber or hitting a watermelon. And what they tell you is that if you hit somebody in the skull with these, you're gonna kill them. It's a deadly weapon. And then you watch the YouTube video where the kid hits himself at full speed and it doesn't even knock him out. And you realize maybe this isn't quite as effective as they make it look in the movies. I mean, I saw Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee, 1973, and he's fighting in a cave with these super lightweight nunchaku. And he's hitting these little Asian guys, and granted, they're like 110 pounds, but he's going, whoa! And he hits this guy in the body, and the guy sails backwards, like 20 feet, hits the wall and slides to the ground. Whoa! And hits over there, and the next guy goes flying. And before you know it, he's gone, whoa, about 6 times, and there's a body count, and they're all 20 feet away from him. Because these things are explosive. And I don't want to be mean, because this is one of my favorite weapons, but that's not accurate. These were not real effective as a striking platform tool. Holding it out here, and if somebody had a sword, these really don't work. Because remember, what you have is a stick, a piece of leather cord, and another stick. And if she has a sword, and I'm going, wah, wah, and she reaches out and goes, shoop, I'm left with a stick and a sad little leather cord going flop, flop. And this is not working. You guys laugh way too much at the flop. Anyway. However, having said that these were not effective against bladed weapons, and they really weren't very good as a striking weapon. Did you know that, and I'm not sure if it's still the case, but when I lived in Texas and worked security, the nunchaku was illegal for law enforcement to carry as a weapon. Think about it, Texas. You can get a carry permit for a bazooka in Texas, but you can't use these. And, well, I don't want to over-exaggerate, but there was an RPG, and we're an anime con, I need to explain this. RPG does not mean role-playing game. It means rocket-propelled grenade. In case you were wondering. You could get a permit to have one of them, but you couldn't use these if you were in law enforcement. And it wasn't because they were the ultimate, wow, this is better than the neutron bomb. They're all falling down. They were illegal because of lawsuits. Because despite what you see in the movies, the way you use the nunchaku, Filipino arts, they're called the tabatiok. That's more complicated, but I'm trying to show off. Because I spent 6 years in Filipino arts, and that's where I learned how to use these the most. You didn't hold them like this to hit somebody. If somebody had a knife, especially, a bladed weapon, you held them in front of you like this. In a kind of closed stance, looks a little bit like a basic ready stance for Muay Thai kickboxing. Hand base was a little bit lower, so you could see over the top to see what was going on. Kristen, can I borrow you for a minute? I know I told you were getting this panel off, but I changed my mind. Here, let's give you your own weapon. This is how much I trust you. If somebody had a knife, you didn't want to be here, because if I swing and miss, by the time I recover, even though this is moving really fast, you learn in a fight that when they recoil and recover, you move into that space. And if I've got this in motion moving away, she can get inside my guard. There's nothing I can do about it. The reason why these are illegal in Texas for law enforcement is that Japanese peasants, and of course the ninja, used it this way. They held them here, and when the knife attack comes in, you would pass it this way, and then go here. Now, this is a Japanese demonstration, but I would like to introduce you to a French word. It's called tourniquet. You realize what I've just done is I've wrapped a chain around her radius and ulna, and I have two short sticks for leverage. And with a little bit of pressure, the radius and ulna do not meet, but with the right amount of pressure, I can change nature's design and introduce those two bones to each other. The reason why these are illegal in Texas for law enforcement is because of the lawsuits. They were used as a trapping weapon where you would block, wrap it around, and snap the arm. And then hold on because you could move in deeper then. I've got the arm and the knife. I broke the forearm. I can move in and dislocate the elbow, and then I can shift in and break her neck. Now Kristen will never come to another anime con with me. Ever. And if we have anybody you do it with fists, people punching, that's around. It's a horrible weapon for people holding short weapons trying to attack you. And if we have anybody that's big in Taekwondo goes, well, I just kick them. You would. And your sidekick comes sideways from you, but it still comes right down the center, the same way that knife strike did. So when you're doing your sidekick, Super Ninja here with the nunchaku is going around and around your ankle and doing the exact same thing. Snap. Because your ankle is thicker than your wrist bones, but not as strong as the chain on my toy. And you can go in deeper. Is anybody actually in Taekwondo? What's the first kick they teach you?
Front kick?
Yes, the front kick, because it's basic and it lets you still stay square with your opponent. And whether it's kicking from the rear leg or the front leg where you're sliding, the front kick is the first technique you learn. Imagine, if you will, since you guys are flexible and you can kick high with that front kick, it looks really cool to kick somebody in the chin. So you've got a guy who's got his hands right here, this way, and that person throws a front snap kick towards your face, and my movement is up under the heel, and forwards and down, and then over the top. So what I just did was shelved your kick, so you're on my shoulder and this is on your knee.
That's bad.
Yeah, the next move is dropping my center. This way! And this moves farther than this does. So your leg goes, I feel like I'm in the mafia. I broke his legs without a baseball bat. So this was, while it's not it's not my favorite of these weapons, it's probably the most misunderstood ninja weapon of all time. Because the nunchaku, again, Bruce Lee movies, wah, wah, and he's knocking people over. And they are great for hand-eye coordination and training things. My instructor was vicious, because at the beginning of class, we had to do push-ups and sit-ups. So you'd start at one wall, run to the other wall, touch it, drop, and do 30 push-ups. Run back, touch the wall, drop, do 30 sit-ups. Then 25, 25, 20, 20, 15, 15, 10, 10, 5, 5, 1. By the time you're done, you did 106 of each. But while you were doing that, he was working on his next martial arts exhibition, doing dual-wielding nunchaku with aerial techniques. You know, if you've seen people that are really good at these, they can spin them around one finger. And he'd be doing aerial stuff, up into the air and catch it behind his back while he was walking back and forth. So you're on the ground doing push-ups, and all of a sudden you hear him swear and things flying. I never knew whether I was supposed to show good martial skill and awareness and move, or whether I was supposed to be a good student and trust my sensei and do my push-ups. The answer was no. Whichever one I picked was wrong. But these were still really cool weapons, but not my favorite. My favorite was this, the kama. It's a hand scythe. Famous in Children of the Corn movies everywhere. This is a gardening tool. You can still buy these at Walmart. $10.88, $9.88 if you find that price is falling sign. But if you go to Walmart and you buy that, what you see is a piece of basically balsa wood, cheap cottonwood, with a metal cap on it, with a little flange sticking out with a blade. And if you take that home and start digging around in a garden rather than just a flower bed, You know the difference. A flower bed is all the dirt from a bag that's all nice hummus, and a garden is real dirt in your yard. If you buy one of those, take it home and start digging around in the garden, you're trying to cut out big weeds and break up clumps of clay, you're gonna break that thing in a half an hour. 15 minutes if you hate gardening and you're oversized. 10 minutes if you're really angry. Because they weren't made for heavy use. So people discount the kama as a self-defense weapon because of the modern equivalent that we know now. But keep in mind, Japan was a caste system. That meant samurai was going to be samurai. And everybody's familiar with the idea of a samurai sword being passed down generation after generation. Japanese farm tools were also meant to last, and they were made differently, and they were handed down father to son. And the old Japanese kama was a very solid piece of steel, one piece. It had the blade, and then it made a right angle and came down, and you would attach wooden grips to it with rivets, pins normally, just like on a handle on a sword, to protect your hands, because you can shape wood into decent shape where it won't destroy your hands. If you just work with metal, no matter how soft and smooth you make the metal, digging around, it's just, your hands don't callus and toughen up to that, it just tears the calluses off. So they put wood handles on them, but these were strong and designed to last a lifetime, several lifetimes, for heavy use. The downside to kama as a self-defense weapon is they're not sharp on this side, and when you're fighting somebody, that's the side towards them. The plus side is if you look at the head of the weapon from that angle, you see how it's thin, but it narrows. It's narrower at the very tip than it is at the base. And the blade does the same thing this way too, so it comes to this point. And if anybody watches horror movies, there's always the damsel in distress. She's wearing a tank top or a bikini, and she's running through the woods in slow motion towards the camera, because it's a great movie. And she's running, and the bad guy's chasing her like this. And no matter how, she could be an Olympic athlete, and she's running and he's walking, and when she trips and falls down, and she always does, he's right on top of her. Because apparently this is faster than it looks. And while she's laying there going, no, no, the guy reaches out with a spork from KFC and goes, doink, and sticks it in her skull. And you're like, all right, that's it, I can't watch this movie anymore. It was believable right up to that point. But you can't penetrate the human skull that easily. Sometimes you can. With the right tool, you can open any can. And these were actually tapered correctly, where with a short motion, less with the shoulder and more with the elbow, and then follow through with the wrist, you could go this way and develop enough speed and force that this would penetrate the human skull pretty easily. I did promise you before we started the whole panel that I would explain how I broke our living room window with a coconut. We practice with these. The inside curve is sharp enough, you can actually cut through tatami mats with it, the right angle. But I was really obsessing over the idea of being able to hit this correctly, where you could generate enough force to penetrate a human skull. And so what we heard was on the Philippine Islands with these, they used coconuts for training. So we got an 8-foot table, we put it in the yard, we put a couple towels down and lumped them up a little bit, and we'd set coconuts, me and my son, and stand there and go, whoa! And if you got the angle right, it would hit the top of the coconut, and you could puncture through one end of the coconut, through the middle, which was hollow, and then through the bottom, and stick the kama in your wife's 8-foot table. And that's if you did it right. It was awesome. If you did it wrong, if your angle was too abrupt or you started to turn the wrist too quickly, remember this side's not sharp. What would happen is that you hit it right like this and drive through, and you would create a coconut launcher. Bang! And the coconut would squirt out and go that way. The house we lived on, they didn't want to do it in the front yard because people would call the police. That's just crazy. So we went to the backyard, and the backyard, there's a road behind us that people drive on. And I knew I couldn't explain to State Farm how I broke somebody's car windshield with a coconut. while they were driving. So being a conscientious instructor and wanting to teach my son how to do things right, see, we're not going to do that towards the street where somebody might get hit. We walked around to the other side of the table, towards the house. And sure enough, like the fourth one, boom, coconut, zing, living room window. And then my son learned a new four-letter word that I'd never said before. A couple of them, followed by my wife's four-letter words that I'm like, well, I couldn't do it towards the street. I had to do it towards the house. I'm being responsible. My wife says, you couldn't turn the table sideways? There's nothing there but a fence. I'm like, oh yeah. Didn't even occur to me. The comma, though, being short weapons, they were actually, it was very common to use two of them. And I want to show you how they worked, but my assistant will absolutely not let me swing these at her. Hi, Kristen, come back. And I will give you, please keep in mind, you saw what the real ones look like. Differentially heat-treated steel, sharp enough to cut through arms and coconuts. This is the practice version. I know, it doesn't look very scary, does it? Look, it's Toucan Sam. This is the Fruit Loop panel. But this is how they use the comma. So we'll just pretend you still have a knife. Bad guy stabs with a knife, and your goal was block. So now I'm cutting the inside of her wrist. And if she extends out like that, I'm going to go this way. And this is going just above the tricep and cutting this way as I pull back on her arm. Did anybody see Terminator 2? Do you remember when Arnold proved he was a Terminator by pulling off the skin from his arm? I know how they did that. I have no idea how to put it back on, but I know how to peel it off. You didn't usually go for the arm, though. When they stabbed, if you did block to the outside, you'd go here, kidney, and pull. If you were shorter than the person attacking you, you'd go here and go for the back of the knee and pull. And if you weren't fast enough to get to the outside, you'd still block, you'd go inside, you'd have to go somewhere else, like here. And not the head. You're not trying to penetrate, you could penetrate the skull, but if you screw up, it'll glance off and they can keep fighting. So normally with the comma, what you did is you went inside, so you would hit inside the collarbone and down into the chest cavity, where once again, if she had a heart, she'd be dead. You could also do reverse grip with these, which was a pretty common attack thing. So you go one forehand and one backhand. So when they'd attack, you block the weapon and go here, because that could go under the chin and up into the skull. And if she had a brain, it was a Wizard of Oz reference. You're from Kansas. You could also go lower, where this would go here, just under the edge of the sternum and up and in. Guys, they also went lower than that. Because if you took the comma and went here and up, the fight's over. Whether they hit anything really serious there or not, the femoral artery runs right through there. And cutting the femoral artery is the second fastest way to kill someone. The first is asking them to pay for the check, but the other, it's actually here. But this worked well for both. It's my favorite weapon. The only problem with it is it has very limited reach. Okay, the sticks were only 2 feet long, and remember, it wasn't sharp on this side. So while it worked great for farmers for hand-to-hand combat against robbers and brigands, people that were on horseback that would come through and throw torches onto the barn or the house, do bad things, they couldn't reach them very well. So what they did is they would take, and if anybody's seen comma as a martial arts weapon, there's a metal cap on the end with a little loop there. The reason why is farmers would take a leather cord, a rope, and tie it to the end of this, so that when they were facing someone on horseback, and you've seen the ninja movies where there's a chain hanging on this, they would take the end of the chain in this hand, use usually a weight on the end, they'd hold this part, well, this hand, and then they'd hold this about 2 feet down and flip it over the top, and then throw it. They weren't actually trying to get it to come out this way, because it just aerodynamically didn't work that way, and it was too hard a shot. What they did is they would throw the comma so that it would go over and past the guy on horseback, and as soon as it arced past, Remember I had the other end here? I'd throw it and then step back and pull down. So the combo would go out and then in. And your goal was to try to get this part to cut in and get caught behind the scapula, behind the shoulder blade. And then you would yank them off their horse. And while the farmer's wife and children would come running out and go, ow, ow, and stomp him to death, the farmer would take the horse and go, here, pony, and take him back to the barn. So these were really cool for that too. So if you see them in the ninja movies where they're doing that against a guy on foot, like this, they didn't actually use it that way, because if you threw it against a guy on foot and you missed, he would be inside your guard. Remember, 21 feet for drawing a gun. Try to pull all the chain back to get this back. It's going to take a while. So they're going to be inside your guard, but they would throw them against people on horseback and pull back because they're nude. All right. We have 4 minutes left, and I have about 6 more weapons, but I talked too much and I promised questions, so please ask me a question. It doesn't necessarily have to be about ninja weapons. You can ask me if I'm on my meds. The truth is, yes, not only am I taking my meds, I'm taking hers too. And I'm pretty sure birth control and Red Bull wasn't supposed to mix.
Next year, because you said that the convention was the one that scheduled what panels you were doing, is that correct?
Yes.
Is there a way that you can ask them to do your normal show for maybe next year?
I would love to do our stage show again, because we didn't do it the last 2 times I was here.
Yeah,
And I like doing test cutting, the Tommy Shigiri stuff with the sword.
Yeah, I still have
And
a
so
piece.
I will ask. And honestly, when I sent them our brochure, I also sent them, we have 6 new panels that we started doing this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I sent them that as a separate sheet. But John ends up doing all the scheduling stuff himself, and it's a huge amount. When you look at the program guide, and you're looking at it going, that's really not that much stuff. Imagine being the one person who put that schedule together and had to deal with 4 different guests, 3 or 4 different cosplay guests, and all the fan panels. It's an immense amount of work.
Right.
And I know for this year what he did was he mostly used my schedule from last year and just gave it to me again. And I changed the sword classes to do the new ones because I could. And I couldn't really change the ninja weapons of death and make it into my stage show because somebody would have noticed that I was doing test cutting with a samurai sword and not sneaking around in a little ninja costume going hua with nunchaku. Or throwing stars, my real favorite weapon. Hua! And you know why that works? Because what you just did was normal human response. This weapon, the 4-sided shuriken, for all that it's a ninja weapon, this was carried by the samurai. Do you know why? It's Japanese fashion. You know what a hakama is, right? The divided apron thing? Okay. The hakama has, the back part of it has a stiffened fabric piece that's about this big, and it sits right above the cords, right here. And that's just part of the hakama. As the samurai was out walking around, everybody in Japan had to be right-handed. That's how you train. The sword was carried on this side. So if you're a bunch of bad guys, and I'm out walking my helper with my samurai sword, as soon as I reach forward to draw the sword, you're going to grab my hand and try to keep me from drawing the weapon. So what the samurai did is they cut a slit in the top part of that piece on the hakama, and if I were more into Japanese clothing, I'd know the name of that piece too, but I'm really sorry, I barely know what I'm wearing now, which explains a lot about my wardrobe, right? She's like, do you have any t-shirts that aren't black? No. I had some that weren't black when they started, but since I washed them all together, they're now all kind of a dark gray. But they'd cut a slit in the top, and they would put one of the 4-pointed throwing stars in the fabric, because no matter how you twist and fall, the fabric was big enough and stiff enough to protect you from the razor sharp edges. If you have a ninja costume that's got that little pocket right here for a throwing star, that's Hollywood. If you take a razor sharp piece of steel that's 5 inches across and coated with neurotoxin, so the slightest prick will kill you, and put it right here and start doing tumbles and rolls and combat stuff, and then you reach in when you need it and stick that in, you're going to cut yourself. I mean, you already know that. You guys are smiling as soon as I put it right there. You're like, that's dumb, especially for girls. Yeah. So what they did is they put it here, and if you were ever attacked, we're out walking, and the hoodlums are close, they're expecting me to reach this way and grab the sword, and instead what you do is reach behind you and go, Fwah! And throw that, and he freezes. Just long enough, they go, ah! And I hit him with that piece of steel, and it hurts. It won't end him, but it will hurt him, and while he's going, ah! I'm going, stepping forwards, and now the game's over. So they actually use them as a great distraction that way. And as far as the poison thing goes, you know that's mostly myth, right? Do you know throughout recorded history what the #1 substance for coating a metal weapon was? Worldwide, not just Japan, but worldwide. #1 substance used for poisoning someone. Somebody guess. Just say it.
Mercury.
What?
Who?
Fecal matter.
Yes! Poop! So here's your throwing star. We're going out on our mission. Welcome to the clan. It's you and me. We're going to go hang upside down from the rafters, and when this guy gets home, we're going to kill him. Here, this one's yours. Can you imagine you've got that on your person? You've been hanging there for 4 hours, and the guy slides open that fusama and goes, ooh, smells like ninja, and steps back out. And there you have it. Ninja weapons of death. And now I gotta dig that back out. You guys have been awesome. Thank you very much. If you have questions or anything, see me after class. And you can't leave because closing ceremony starts as soon as John gets up here.
Oh, no pressure.
It's time. You realize I saw him poke his head in. I'm like, we're ready.
Oh,
I'm like,
know.
okay, no one's here. I'll just keep talking. And now it's 5:02.
I walked in 10 minutes ago, didn't I? You guys saw me. I waited.